Okay, this is me going through an autobiographical collage type project, and I'm just going to go through the creation process of this. This is for the final project for DMA 12 and digital painting. And the idea is you go out, take 3 to 5 pictures. You can take more if you want. Use the photographs as the basis of a collage, and that collage can be done in Photoshop, it can be done in Procreate, whatever painting tool you have access to. It can be done in Clip Studio, it can be done in Lightning Paint, Magma IO, or a couple other programs. And you use the photographs as your base layers, as templates for the final image that you'll create. So I went out and I bought a Egg McMuffin a couple days ago, and this is the basis of my autobiographical collage that I'll be demonstrating. Now, this is very mundane. This is me just buying a breakfast sandwich, and the photographs here I'm using are images of myself. So I have a selfie wearing the mask, of course, because I have to follow the rules. Me reaching in and grabbing the sandwich, sandwich wrapped, sandwich unwrapped. Maybe a photograph of the environment surrounding me, so that would add to the collage. Another selfie, and then me eating the sandwich. And as part of me eating the sandwich, I bring a sketchbook with me to a lot of places, so I was just drawing some weird character as I was eating it, but you know, that's part of the experience that I was undergoing. So these are all the photos that I kind of want to bring together. Now, like I said, I have more than 5. 3 to 5 I think is fine, but if you can find more, that's great. That's totally up to you. And so the idea for this is to create a final composition. Now, I'm giving the parameters for the composition to be something that's 160 by 200 square inches. I mean, that's roughly, and this is at 72 dots per inch. And so you can take those measurements and come up with the actual size. You know, maybe my design's 11 by 17, maybe it's 20 by 10, maybe it's 8 by 20. Those all fit within the measurements that I am specifying for this. So you can come up with a size that's non-conventional, a non-conventional size. Maybe it's very narrow, or maybe it's very tall. That's something that you can explore. That's up to you. So for instance, let's say for this I want to go with 20 inches by 10 inches. So that's what I'll go with. Like I said, as long as you stay within the parameters, it's fine. So I'm in Photoshop. That's my choice of application for this. I'm going to go new here and set up my size. I want it to be 72, so I'm going to put 72 here. And then let's say this is a tall type portrait sized image. So for my width, I'll go with 10 inches, and for my height, I'll go with 20. I'll hit OK. And this is what I got. So this is the size I'll be working with. Now, as part of this, instead of just jumping right in and going through the creative process, what I am recommending is coming up with a couple of thumbnail sketches to help inform the composition, help make you think about what you want to compose before you actually start going into the project. And if I pick this size here, which is 20 by 10, what I can do is maybe use this as a means to create my initial thumbnail sketches. So you can do it on a piece of paper outside of the application you're using and then take a picture of it. You can do it within the application. You can do it within a different application. But the idea is just to kind of come up with some compositional design type sketches to help you think about what the final composition may look like. Here in Photoshop, what I'll do is I will create artboards for this. So I will go into my toolbar, use the Artboard tool. I will make a selection around my initial canvas for that artboard, and then duplicate that 4 times by hitting Command J, and now I have 4 artboards. So I'll use this as the basis for coming up with some quick compositional type visualizations. You could call these thumbnails. These are just kind of looking at the actual framework of the design and not getting into a lot of detail. In each one of these artboards, I'm going to create layers because I have to have layers in the artboards in order to actually draw on them in Photoshop. So I'm just clicking on each artboard and clicking the new layer icon. And then I can go in here. Now I'm using a tablet. You know, if you don't have a tablet, you can use like shapes maybe to represent the composition. So, you know, going into, let's say, layer 1, and maybe, you know, maybe this is a section. And think in terms of breaking things up into sections. Maybe that's a section there, and then maybe, you know, adding here I'm going to use the line tool. And maybe make that thicker. The line tool has kind of been changed in recent versions of Photoshop, where you can only use the pixel option for the line tool. So if you go into shapes here, you see that like rectangle tool has pixels and path and shapes as options. Path and shape will create new shape layers, whereas pixels will actually draw right on the canvas. So shape and path are vector based. Pixels is, you know, pixel based as the name implies. But for some reason, the line tool, if you go into shape, draw it out, oh, it actually worked. So for some reason, it's working now. It used to not work, but it actually creates a. If you look here, what it does, it creates a stroke around that line. So I'm gonna draw out some lines. So for some reason, I think in one version that they stopped using the options shape and path. That's fine, whatever, you know. So let me go back a little bit. So this is just me drawing out boundaries, let's say. So let's say for my collage, maybe one photograph would go in this top section, maybe something else would go here, maybe something else would go in this bottom section. So these initial thumbnails are just a means to figure out a sense of balance and a sense of harmony that you can rely upon before jumping into it. Now, I am going to, for these other ones, I'm just going to draw directly using the brush tool in Photoshop. You know, so exploring different just kind of boundaries. Maybe, you know, that's an idea. Maybe I have one design where I just kind of work in quadrants, even though that's kind of boring, so maybe I need something else in there to break it up. And then here's this final one. Maybe I go with something that's a little bit more exotic, with wavy lines and radiating lines and maybe a couple boxes there. So something that maybe is somewhat organic. And a little bit more abstract. So there you go. So there's 3 different ideas to play with. So these are compositional ideas that I can use as the initial basis for the design. It's just meant to get your inspiration flowing, thinking about what possibly you could do. You don't have to rigidly use these. You can kind of deviate as you work on the project. But let's say I like this one right here. So I like that second, number 2, let's say. So I'll use that. So let me use that. So one of the things I do a lot now is I take screenshots and I use the ability to shave the screenshot to the clipboard and then paste it into a new document. So I think that's the fastest way to work. So Photoshop, you can say Shift Control Command 4, just drag around this. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'll create my final project document. And then paste that right in there. Let me double check the size here. So inches, that is not correct. So I'm going to make sure it's the correct size. So I'm going to change the height back to 20 and unclick the little chain there in the middle. That chain link will ensure that you have a ratio of width to height that's proportional, but for some reason it kind of it has a decimal value there that I want to change, so I'm going to unclick that, and now I have 10 by 20 inches and hit OK. So now I have my thumbnail sketch in the actual project itself. I'm at 10 by 20 inches. And now I can start to build up my layers using the photographs that I took. And this initial sketch right here is just kind of, I would say, it's an informal guide. It's just to help you think in terms of composition, creating some initial balance. You don't have to abide by it 100%. So the next thing I want to do is bring in my photographs, and I'll use the same technique. I think it's just faster to copy and paste directly into Photoshop. Otherwise, with photos, you would have to export them as JPEGs. If you're using your iPhone to take photos for this project, the iPhone has a default file format of .heic, which is not a standard format you would import into an application. So you have to export each photo as a JPEG or a PNG and then import them into Photoshop. To me, that is just a lot of extra time that would be spent doing that. So what I like to do is just take quick screenshots using the same method. So Shift Control Command 4. Windows has the equivalent. I think it's like the window key and Shift W. I'm not 100% sure, but here I'm copying the image and then I'm pasting it right into Photoshop. And I will select this here, my hand. So copy, paste into Photoshop. Egg McMuffin image. You know, copying this, pasting. Every time I paste into Photoshop, it's giving me a new layer. Almost every painting application out there would probably do the same thing, I would imagine. You can do this. You know, one of the things you can do in Procreate, if you're on an iPad, is just use the iPad to take your photos and then bring those photos into Procreate. So that would be a very efficient way to work. That's kind of the advantage of using tablet-based applications. So here, this is a nice one of me eating the McMuffin. And then I will copy this character just because it's kind of strange and kind of fun. And then me drawing the character with the egg McMuffin. So now I have a bunch of layers, and these are the things that I'm going to manipulate. And so maybe I can start to position these different layers. So let me make myself smaller. You don't need to see me that much anymore. And then let's begin to position some of this stuff based on my template. So just using the move tool. I'd like to turn auto select off, by the way. And I'd like to with the move tool V shortcut, just command click on something, and then Photoshop lets you quickly reposition it. I'm using command T to scale as I reposition, and then double clicking after I use command T to make that transformation, to set that transformation. So let's see. I have my hand behind here. I really want my selfie to kind of be like the main thing in the composition, so I'm gonna keep that at the center, and I'm kind of surrounded by all this stuff happening now. So the next part is to actually start painting or start doing some sort of photo collage. And for this, you're going to want to create masks, layer masks, and paint out elements in your different photos. You may want to shift select all of your photos and then hit Command G or Control G on a PC to create a group. And that's kind of as a backup, and then duplicate the group, and then you can turn off the original group. Now I can modify these photographs, and if I mess up in any way, I can always go back to the originals. And this would also be a good time for me to go to save and do a save as. And let's see. So I'm going to call this McMuffin Collage. I think I spelled it wrong, but that's okay. Okay, so now I'm going to start masking some things, and this is where I want you to explore several different types of masks. So if you have a layer and you click the mask icon, it creates a empty white mask. The corners have these little white areas kind of outlined in the corners, which is telling you that the mask is what's active, not the actual image which the mask is applied to. And then you can paint with the brush tool in Photoshop, just paint it black on the mask, and it's revealing the background. So I'm just kind of creating an outline around myself. If you don't want to see that background, what you can do is you can option click on the eyeball, your visibility. Now I just have me all by myself here, and it just makes it easier sometimes to see what I'm doing. Sometimes I will also create a solid color layer below what I'm doing, so I can use the adjustment layer tool here and pick solid color, and in my color picker pick something that's kind of bright and obvious, like this green. So now when I trace in my mask, I can kind of see what I'm doing. You can also option click on the mask itself, and that will just show you the mask. So with this, what I'd like to do is just create like an enclosed shape for the mask, and then I use my magic wand tool to select the outside area. I make sure contiguous is turned on. If black is the foreground color, I can hit Option Delete. It fills everything up with black, and then I can use my magic wand tool on the white, and then I can invert that selection by hitting Shift Command I and then hitting Option Delete again, because the selection initially has this little white outline, and that's going to affect the mask. And what I'm doing here is basically creating a mask that is masking out everything on the canvas. Otherwise, sometimes you have areas that are not masked and they'll kind of reveal through. So I just want a solid black area that is filled solid with black for my mask, to ensure that I don't have anything floating around that I don't want masked. So that's the first thing I masked out. So this is just a process here. So that's one type of mask you can play with, just a regular mask where you're masking it out using your brush tool to paint black in the mask. Whatever you paint black is going to be hidden or transparent. The white is going to be the thing that is being revealed. So I'll do that again for this layer that has the drawing with the Egg McMuffin in it. Kind of bring it out a little bit. So let's say I just want to see the paper in the drawing and not the pens. So grab my mask, hit B for the brush tool. This is just like a quick mask. You can also make the brush bigger and then don't even deal with the selection process and just kind of paint everything away. Sometimes that's not perfect and you have little bits of white, so little bits of the background kind of show through. And then I'll option click on this, kind of see what I got here, and then maybe I'll just kind of fill this in a little bit. And again, this whole white area above here, I probably want to just fill that with black so the whole thing is masked out. So I then use the magic wand tool, click on the white, hit Option Delete, fill it with black, click on the white area which I want to remain, invert it, Shift Command I, and then Option Delete again, so I have a nice black mask on that. So now I have that part masked out. You can play with other types of masks just for fun, and this may give you some interesting results. So for instance, I have this hand holding the sandwich, and I'm going to turn off everything else by option clicking, so now it's only the hand holding the sandwich. So you can experiment with other masks. Here I'm going to transform this, make it a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to use, instead of using the magic wand tool, I'll use the object selection tool. So that's a new tool. Use it on the hand holding the sandwich, and it's interesting. It selected the sandwich but not the hand. Let me see if I can do that twice on just the hand. And now I got the hand and the sandwich, and then I'll hit the little mask icon here, and it masked it out. Little area around the thumb didn't get masked for some reason, but I'll just leave it. Sometimes the imperfections are interesting. So I got that. Here I got this whole sandwich here, just using the move tool so I can actually see it in the space. I'll use that object selection tool again. It's like really quick on the McMuffin, but that's masked out. So I have this here, this Egg McMuffin being held in my hand. Now I think I'm going to try a different technique to mask it out. This time I'm only going to mask out the words. or everything but the words. I like the words Egg McMuffin. Maybe I'll utilize that in some way. So I'll go to Selection, go to Color Range, and then with Color Range, you get a little eyedropper, and I'll click on the words egg. And I want that to affect, well, it's fine what it's doing. It's selecting colors that are similar throughout. You can play with the fuzziness. If you lower it, it's going to stick with more of the colors that you selected. And okay, and then I'll hit OK. So it selected the word egg, and then I'm gonna get my mask icon here on that. Now I have the word egg masked out. So I'm just masking out all the stuff. I got this background. So with this, maybe I'll do a different type of mask. Maybe I'll do what I like to call a gradient mask. And a gradient mask is just using the gradient tool with a mask. So I'll click on the layer mask icon for this. I'll go click on my gradient tool. It's set to black and white. You can go up into basics and pick black and white. And the idea of the gradient mask, it just kind of partially will mask out something kind of like this. So you just drag and it kind of fades out a background image, which can be interesting. Maybe that's a background image that I can utilize. Let's see, I got the hand going in the bag. So again, for this, I'll use my object selection tool. And now I just have this hand, which is kind of cool. I got this weird character I drew. And for this, I don't know if the object selection tool will work. Let's see what happens if I use it on the character. So I'm dragging out the object selection tool on this character. Yeah, it kind of worked. So now I got this weird character that I can include in my collage. So I got a weird character here. And then it looks like everything is masked out. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 photographs, 3 above what is recommended. And everything is masked. There's my kind of background design that I initially worked with. So let's think about this space here, how we want to fill things in here. Because I want to fill up the white space. So I got my background here. I'm going to increase the scale of that. So maybe that's filling up the whole space as much as possible. And maybe what's filling up the lower half of the space is my wrapper with my drawing. So I'm going to actually put this on the layer below the background. And then oops, not that. This wrapper, this right here. And then I'm going to scale that up, kind of make it fill in the space. So I got my whole background filled in. Now I lost my template a little bit, so what I'm going to do is maybe take the template, put it all the way to the top of my layer stack here, and then I can't really see anything because I don't have any transparent pixels, but I can use a blend mode. If I drew dark dividing lines here for this thumbnail compositional template, I can use a blend mode of darken, and now I can see through that. So now I can see a little bit better to see these different quadrants here. So for this, trying to figure out what to do next. Maybe this character goes here. Maybe I like the lamp in the triangle up there. Maybe I go here, down below. Maybe and I'm gonna lock actually this template on top too. So hit the little lock icon. That means I won't select that layer and move it by accident. Okay, so now I have the hand here. I like that hand. Maybe I'll move it, scale it, and have it kind of fit that diagonal space. And then I got this McMuffin here, maybe for the top section. I will scale that up and then have this McMuffin come down like that. So I think I have my composition set. I kind of like everything that's going on here. So I'm going to turn off my template. So now I can play around with some stuff. So I talk about using brushes in this assignment, turning something into a brush. So I think a good candidate is the McMuffin sandwich. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Option, click on the visibility icon. I like the positioning of where it's at, so I want to keep it, but I want to use it for a brush. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate the layer by hitting Command J, hit Command T to transform it, scale it down, and then make a selection around the scaled down McMuffin. So using the Marquee tool, just left click dragging, and then going to Edit, define brush preset, call it McMuffin brush. Hit Command D to get rid of my selection. Turn off that layer and then go back and turn on my other layers. So go back to where I was initially. So for this, what I'll do is I will create a new layer. So Shift Option Command N, by the way, is the shortcut. And I'll turn off that muffin layer there. And maybe I'll play with some colors that already exist. And part of this too is try to stick to 3 or 5 base colors. Don't go too crazy with the colors. So I like the yellow of the wrapper. And can't really see that. Let me try just doing a black. And I have to click several times here because the brush itself that I created is had a range of color in it. So when you create brushes, it likes black over white. So yeah, I don't know. Let me sample some blue using the Eyedropper Tool. And that's kind of in the background there. I'm going to raise my layer up. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So I'm silhouetted with a blue McMuffin brush. You know what you can do too is use the Marquee selection tool and grab big sections of things and then turn that into a brush. So I can find brush preset on something like that. And then go into another layer and then kind of overlap something and then clicking on that new layer with that new brush. So I'm painting in the brush there and then hitting the move keyboard shortcut V and then hitting Shift and Option and the plus sign, and then to go through a bunch of blend layer modes. So Shift Option plus sign kind of scrolls through all the different blend modes. So maybe changing the color, something like that, is kind of interesting. Every time I use this brush tool too, I may want to create a new layer for it. So Shift Option Command New, and then click. So I got that face repeated, so that's kind of interesting. So a lot of things are getting obscured in this process as you build up the layers. So you might have to turn layers off and on, you know, see what works, what doesn't work. I think drawing out some compositional thumbnails in the beginning keeps you more focused on certain design elements, so you're not going too crazy in painting this. So another thing I'd like to explore is this idea of taking an element out of here and turning it into like some sort of vector shape and then bringing it back in. So I will do that with the wrapper, where I masked out the letters here. So I think this would be interesting to bring into Illustrator. So what you can do is open up Illustrator. What I'm going to do is go into Illustrator and vectorize the wrapper and then bring it back into Photoshop. So I'm opening up Illustrator. And Command N for a new Illustrator file. So here's Illustrator, and what you can do is in Photoshop, make a selection around what you want to bring into Illustrator, Command C to copy it, and make sure the layer is selected, Command C, and then go into Illustrator and hit Command V. It brought in everything. I only wanted it to bring in the actual thing that I masked out already. So what you can do actually is, it's bringing in the whole image and not the mask when I copy and paste it from Photoshop to Illustrator. So create a new layer, and then you have an empty layer, and you have the masked out McMuffin with just the letters here. And if you hit Shift Command Option E, it will basically flatten the mask, apply it to the McMuffin, and add it to that new empty layer. And now I can Command C a selection around that. And now I can paste that into Illustrator. And now I have just that painted in there. Because I want to get some sort of vectorization of this. I like the words, and I want to bring it back in as a vector from Illustrator into Photoshop. So I brought it in, and if you want to turn this into vectors, make sure you can actually see the property bar here. So you can, if you click on this with your regular selection tool in Illustrator, there is an image trace button in the properties bar. You can also go into this control bar on top. If you don't see the control bar, you go to Windows, you turn on control bar here. It has image trace in here as well. So you click on image trace and it converts it to black and white. This is like a preset. So you can go into presets here and you can change these, but I like this graphic look of just the solid letters, just like this. So I have this selected, and then the next step is to expand it, because the image trace does not let you select on individual vector elements. So then you hit this expand button, and now you can use the direct selection tool to like click on elements in here and move them around, or just maybe click on certain things and delete those things that you don't want. But I kind of like all this stuff here, so I'm going to drag select over it, do another copy paste, and then turn on my layers here in Photoshop. I'm going to get rid of that one egg McMuffin layer. So go back to my composition. And then Command V to paste that. And when you paste vectors from Illustrator, you get this little pop-up. You can paste it as layers from Illustrator, so you get all the Illustrator layers if you had additional layers associated with what you copied. A smart object is going to give you the ability to edit it back in Illustrator. So you paste it, it forms this smart object layer in Photoshop. You double click on it and it will open up Illustrator and you can edit that again. A path is a vector path, and a shape layer is a vector-based shape layer. But I just want pixels, so I'm going to hit OK, bring it in as pixels, and then kind of scale this up. Make it big. And now I can do other things with this if I want to get rid of the interior white part of the G. I can use the magic wand tool, just delete that. I can select these characters, so I'm kind of shift selecting each one. Maybe I fill this with a different color. So a lot of things a lot of times you can just pull from the composition. So maybe I want this yellow, and then I can option delete because that's the foreground color. Maybe I want a different yellow. And then that fills that in. So, you know, it's kind of getting interesting. So I've used a bunch of different techniques. I've used regular masks. I've used this idea of a gradient mask. I've used different selection techniques. I've used vectors from Illustrator. I've used brushes that I've made in Photoshop. What you can do at a certain point is starting to paint over some of this stuff, which can be kind of interesting. So let's say I duplicate myself here. So Command J to duplicate my selfie image of me wearing the mask. Bring it all the way to the top. Use the transform tool to scale it up. And I'm just going to use this as a kind of a template for a drawing that I'll do on top of it. So I will take my image of my selfie on that layer, and I will reduce the opacity. I'll option click too, so I only see the selfie here. I'll bring back my other layers after I'm done drawing. I'll go into my new layer for the drawing. Maybe I'll use like blue. There's blue in the composition, so maybe use some additional blue. And I'll use the brush tool, and I'll go into my brushes here, and I'll go back and select just a normal round brush, because it had that custom brush that I defined. And here I'll make sure you're painting in the right layer as well. So I got to make sure I'm in the right layer. So you can bring in your layers, and you can, you know, if you like the paint, if you have a tablet, you can add to the composition somehow. And sometimes it's nice to combine hand drawing techniques with photo collage. It's just compositionally, it can be very interesting, very somewhat experimental. And then I'm going to turn off that template layer and kind of bring back my other layers. So that's kind of interesting, but now, you know, it's getting maybe a little busy. So I have my drawing as a central element. So I can create new layers, and maybe I keep on drawing up here, blocking off things. I like sometimes like a rough hand-drawn feel. Then I can play with my brush size, increase it, decrease it. You don't have to do this. I mean, this is a technique which really lends itself to having a tablet. But if you don't have a tablet, it's kind of hard to do, right? Using the mouse. So if you don't have a tablet, then just stick to doing a photo collage. So I like to just kind of play with different brush sizes. And then what I also do too is sometimes use a soft edged brush, make it big, sample sections, and then adjust my brush size as I go, and then sample transition points, and then use a lower opacity to have parts of the image kind of flow into other parts. Sometimes I go back with black and add more line work. I like to use keyboard shortcuts too, as much as possible. this is giving it a more sketchy type look and feel. So I would just keep on looking at this composition, seeing what's there, adjusting different elements. There's no right or wrong to this. It's just an exploration to see what you come up with, but the end result should represent some moment in your life where everything comes together. And this is something that you want to push forward, you know, and see how you can bring it to some sort of interesting conclusion. So for this, I recommend getting to a halfway point and then sharing it with people and getting their thoughts. Maybe they can offer you some suggestions on where to take it further. So in the class itself, maybe this would be a good stage where I submit it to the discussion and say, hey, I don't know where I should go with this. Should I finish up the face? Is the face too much? Is it getting too overworked? Should I take out some elements? Do I need to add more elements? Do I need to create more harmony with the color? Those are all sorts of questions you can ask as you bring all the different ideas together into one final autobiographical collage.